That cold morning, no one expected an act of kindness to change everything. What started as another day on the road became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we show that behind the engines and the leather, there are still human hearts. The mist clung to the canyon walls like a shroud, thick and unyielding, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. It was the kind of dawn that swallowed sound, leaving only the low rumble of a Harley cutting through the silence. Jax rode alone that morning, his massive frame hunched over the bike, the wind whipping at his salt and pepper beard. At 6'5" and built like a storm cloud, he was a sight that made folks pull over on the empty highways of Arizona. Leather vest patched with the faded emblem of the Iron Hawks, knuckles scarred from years of holding on when everything else let go. The club wasn't about flash or fury anymore. It was family, the kind forged in the quiet aftermath of wars and losses no one else understood. But out here, on the twisted ribbon of Route 89, Jax preferred the solitude. The road didn't judge. He'd left the others back at the motel in Flagstaff the night before, nursing beers and swapping stories around a fire pit that flickered like old regrets. "Ride it out, brother," Tank had said, clapping him on the shoulder with a hand that could crush stone. Tank, the vice president, always knew when Jax needed space. The canyon called to him then, a pull as old as the ache in his knee from a tour in the sandbox that ended too soon. Jax gunned the engine, the vibration traveling up his spine like a familiar ghost, chasing away the dreams that woke him in sweats. Flashes of sand and screams. A child's face he couldn't save. The sun was just piercing the haze when he veered onto a dirt pullout, the kind hikers used before the trail snaked into the red rock labyrinth of the Grand Canyon's north rim. He killed the engine, the sudden quiet pressing in like water. Boots crunching on gravel, he stretched, breathing in the sharp scent of sage and dust. That's when he heard it, a faint scrape, like fabric against stone carried on the wind. Not an animal, human. His gut twisted, the old instincts kicking in. Jax scanned the edge, where the cliff dropped away in a sheer face of layered sandstone, plummeting hundreds of feet to the river below. There, dangling from a jagged outcrop about 20 feet down, was a woman. Her body swung gently in the updraft, one arm hooked desperately over a root protruding from a crack, the other flailing for purchase. Her pack had snagged on a ledge, ropes tangled in a mess that screamed amateur mistake. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair matted against her pale face, lips moving in silent pleas. Her eyes locked on his as he peered over, wide with terror that mirrored the emptiness he'd seen in too many dying men's stares. "Help!" she rasped, voice barely cutting the wind. "Please, I can't hold on." Jax froze for a beat, the world narrowing to that moment. The drop was suicide. One wrong move, and he'd join her in the fall. His mind raced. Call 911. Wait for the pros with their harnesses and helicopters. That's what a sane man would do. But the Hawks didn't wait for permission. They acted when the world turned its back. And something in her eyes, raw, unfiltered fear, hit him like a punch. She wasn't just any hiker. There was a desperation there, a story etched in the dirt smeared across her cheek. He could walk away, ride on, let the rangers sort it. No one would blame the biker for not playing hero. But the tremor in her grip, the way her fingers slipped an inch, pulled him back. Jax shrugged off his vest, the leather heavy with the weight of patches earned in blood and brotherhood. He scanned the terrain. A narrow ledge snaked along the cliff face, barely wide enough for his bulk, dotted with scrub brush and loose rock. The smell of creosote bush mingled with the faint metallic tang of fear sweat from below. He pulled a coil of rope from his saddlebag, standard gear for any hawk ride, in case of breakdowns or worse. Tying one end to a sturdy piñon pine at the rim, he tested the knot with a yank that made the tree groan. "Hold on," he called down, his voice gravelly, steady despite the pounding in his chest. She nodded, tears carving tracks through the grime on her face. Jax lowered himself over the edge, boots scraping for footholds, the rope biting into his palms through his gloves. The wind buffeted him, cold fingers clawing at his shirt, as the canyon yawned below. Memories flickered. Dust-choked patrols, pulling a buddy from a burning Humvee, the heat singeing his hands as he refused to let go. That kid had made it home, at least to a family that waited. Jax hadn't been so lucky. His own daughter, gone too young to a sickness that no amount of riding could outrun. Halfway down, a rock crumbled under his foot, sending pebbles cascading into the void. He pressed his body flat against the wall, heart hammering, the woman's gasps echoing up like accusations. "I'm slipping," she cried, her arm trembling visibly now. Jax pushed harder, muscles burning, until he reached her level. Up close, she looked smaller, fragile against the vastness, jeans torn at the knee, a silver locket glinting at her throat. He extended a hand, massive and calloused, inches from hers. "Grab on. I've got you." Her fingers brushed his, cold and slick, and in that touch, something shifted. Not just rescue, but a thread connecting two strangers on the edge of everything. As he hauled her toward the ledge, the rope creaking under their combined weight, Jax felt the first crack in his armored solitude. The road had led him here, to this cliff, to this woman whose story he didn't know yet. But in the quiet hum of the wind, he sensed it. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about remembering why he still rode at all. The climb back was agony, inch by inch, her weight pulling at him like an anchor. When they finally crested the rim, collapsing in a heap on the solid ground, she sobbed into the dirt, safe but shattered. Jax sat beside her, breathing hard, the sun warming his back as the mist burned away. He didn't ask questions yet. In the distance, engines hummed, his brothers perhaps, sensing trouble. The Hawks were coming, drawn by loyalty's invisible call. But for now, it was just them, two souls pulled from the brink, the canyon whispering secrets neither was ready to hear. The woman, her name was Elena, though Jax wouldn't learn that for another hour, curled into herself on the dusty ground, her breaths coming in ragged hitches that matched the erratic pulse of the canyon wind. He watched her from a few feet away, giving her space, his massive frame casting a long shadow over the piñon pine that had anchored their lifeline. The rope still dangled from its branches, frayed at the ends like a promise barely kept. Jax wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove, the sting of raw palms a distant echo to the deeper ache in his chest. Saving her had been instinct, the kind drilled into him from years of pulling brothers out of wrecks and firefights. But now, in the aftermath, doubt crept in like the rising sun chasing shadows. Who was she? Why out here alone, gear mismatched for the terrain, as if she'd bolted from something chasing her soul more than her steps? He stood slowly, joints protesting the strain, and retrieved his vest from where it lay crumpled by the bike. Slipping it on felt like armor snapping back into place, the Iron Hawk's patch, a stylized hawk in flight over crossed pistons, grounding him. The club had started as a ragtag group of vets in the 70s, post-Vietnam drifters finding solace in the roar of engines and the code of no man left behind. Jax had joined after his second tour, when the VA left him with pills that dulled the nightmares, but not the emptiness. Now, at 48, he was the quiet enforcer, the one who fixed bikes in the garage back in Phoenix, listening more than he spoke. The Hawks weren't outlaws in the movies. They ran a chop shop for legit repairs, volunteered at the local shelter, stood watch when domestic storms brewed in the trailer parks. But to the world, they were ghosts in leather, judged by ink and rumble before a word was said. Elena stirred, pushing herself up on trembling arms. Her dark hair fell in tangles over eyes that were hazel now in the light, rimmed red from tears and terror. She was slight, maybe 5'4", with the wiry build of someone who'd hiked to outrun more than miles. Faded backpack stuffed with essentials, a water bottle half empty, no phone in sight. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking like dry earth under boot. She rubbed her wrists where the rope had chafed, avoiding his gaze. Jax nodded, crouching to her level, his knees popping in the quiet. Up close, he saw the bruises blooming under her sleeve, faint purple fingerprints that spoke of hands too rough, too insistent. Not from the fall, from before. "You hurt bad?" he asked, low and even, the gravel in his tone softened by concern he hadn't voiced in years. She shook her head too quickly, but her lip quivered, betraying the lie. The canyon stretched around them, vast and indifferent, red walls etched by time into layers of history no one could rewrite. In the distance, a hawk circled, its cry sharp against the hush, mirroring the emblem on his back. Jax pulled a bandana from his pocket, offering it for her hands. She took it hesitantly, dabbing at the scrapes, her fingers brushing his again. Warmer now, less frantic. "Name's Jax," he said, filling the silence before it swallowed them. "Ironhawks. We ride these roads. You?" "Elena," she replied, barely audible, folding the bandana like a shield. Her eyes flicked to his vest, a flicker of wariness crossing her face. The same look waitresses gave at truck stops, locals at gas stations. Bikers meant trouble. The news painted them as predators on two wheels, heartless nomads preying on the weak. She'd heard the stories, no doubt. Raids, brawls, a brotherhood built on fear. But here he was, the giant who'd just hauled her from death's grip, his scarred hands gentle as he helped her to her feet. She leaned on him for a moment, unsteady, the scent of her, sweat and wild sage, mixing with the leather and oil on his skin. I was just hiking. Got turned around in the mist." Jax didn't press. Lies had their place, especially when truth cut too deep. He guided her to his bike, the Harley gleaming dully in the sun, its chrome etched with road dust from Flagstaff. "Rangers are a good hour out on these trails. My club's not far. Got a rig with supplies. You need water, a once-over?" She hesitated, glancing at the cliff as if it might reach up and claim her again, then nodded. The engine roared to life under him, a deep thrum that vibrated through the ground, and she climbed on behind, arms wrapping tentatively around his waist. Her touch was light, cautious, but in it, Jax felt the first thaw in his isolation. The road had thrown them together, and walking away wasn't in his blood. They rode in silence, the canyon blurring into open scrubland, tires humming over asphalt patched with cracks like old wounds. Elena's grip tightened on curves, her breath warm against his back, stirring memories of his daughter, Lily, who'd clung to him like that on rides before the cancer stole her light. 8 years gone, and the grief still rode shotgun, a passenger he couldn't shake. He'd buried it under miles and mechanical work, telling himself the Hawks were family enough. But holding this stranger steady, feeling her heartbeat sync with the engine's pulse, cracked something open. Compassion, long dormant, flickered like embers under ash. By midday, they pulled into the Hawks' outpost, a weathered garage off a forgotten exit, ringed by chain link and junipers. The place smelled of motor oil and mesquite smoke from a barrel fire that never quite died. Tank was there, wiping grease from his forearms, his bald head gleaming as he straightened at the sight of Jax with a passenger. At 6'3", Tank was a wall of muscle and quiet wisdom, a former medic who'd patched more than bikes. "Trouble on the trail?" he rumbled, eyes scanning Elena with the clinical eye of someone who'd seen too many breaks. "Cliffside slip," Jax said simply, helping her down. She stood apart, arms crossed, as if the garage's shadows hid judgments worse than the fall. A couple other hawks milled about. Rico, the wiry mechanic with tattoos mapping his losses, and Lena, no relation but the club's unofficial heart, a nurse who'd traded city lights for this life after her own storms. They nodded greetings, no questions, just space. That's how it worked. Loyalty first, prying later. Elena accepted a bottle of water from Lena, sipping slowly, her gaze darting to the group. Whispers of doubt hung unspoken. Would they call the cops? Demand her story? But Tank just fired up the grill for lunch, the sizzle of burgers cutting the tension like a lifeline. Jax watched her relax a fraction, the first real color returning to her cheeks. In that moment, as the sun beat down on the tin roof, he realized the rescue was just the start. Her bruises, her flight from the trail, they hinted at a darkness chasing her, one the Hawks knew too well from their own margins. Society saw them as the villains, but here, in this dusty haven, they were the ones who caught the falling. And as Elena met his eyes across the fire pit, a silent understanding passed. Whatever storm she'd fled, it had led her to men who understood protection born of pain. The road ahead twisted, but for the first time in years, Jax didn't feel alone on it. The afternoon sun slanted through the chain-link fence like golden bars, casting striped shadows across the garage floor where oil stains bloomed like forgotten bruises. Elena sat on a weathered picnic bench near the fire pit. The burger Tank had plated for her untouched, steam curling up in lazy spirals that carried the scent of charred onions and mesquite. Her hands, wrapped now in clean gauze from Lena's kit, trembled slightly as she twisted the water bottle cap, the plastic crinkling under her grip. Jax leaned against the garage doorframe a dozen yards away, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching without staring. His way of giving space while the pull of curiosity tugged at him like a loose chain. The outpost hummed with low activity. Rico clanging tools in the bay, tuning a club bike with rhythmic precision, the metallic pings echoing off the tin walls. Lena sorting medical supplies in the corner, her movements efficient but soft, as if every bandage held a story of its own. Tank approached Elena first, his heavy boots scuffing the gravel with deliberate slowness. A fresh coffee in hand. Black, no sugar. The way strangers often took it when nerves frayed their edges. He set it down without a word, then pulled up a stool across from her, his bulk making the metal groan. At 52, Tank's face was a map of creases earned from desert patrols and barroom mediations, eyes steady under bushy brows that hid nothing. "Cliffs don't forgive easy," he said, voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Jacks don't either, when it comes to pulling folks back. You eat yet?" She glanced at the plate, then at him, her hazel eyes narrowing just a fraction. Measuring, weighing the man who looked like he could snap bones, but moved like he mended them instead. She picked at the bun, peeling off a sliver of lettuce, her voice emerging thin as the wind through the junipers. "I didn't mean to. It was stupid. The trail marker was gone, or maybe I just missed it." The words hung there, incomplete, laced with the kind of evasion Jax recognized from recruits fresh off deployment, hiding shrapnel scars under fatigues. He shifted his weight, the leather of his vest creaking softly, and stepped closer, drawn by the unspoken plea in her posture, the way her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. The Hawks had seen it before. Women fleeing shadows, men nursing ghosts, all washing up on their doorsteps because the straight world turned blind eyes. Society labeled them the outcasts, the ones to cross the street from, their Harleys a soundtrack to chaos in late-night newsreels. But here, in this patch of scrubland off the interstate, they were the net for those the system let slip. Elena took a sip of the coffee, wincing at the bitterness, and her gaze drifted to the fire pit where embers glowed faintly, even in daylight. "You all. You're not what I thought," she admitted, the confession slipping out like a breath held too long. Tank nodded, no surprise in it, just the quiet acknowledgement of a man who'd heard it 100 times. World's got us painted wrong. We fix what's broke. Machines, mostly. People when we can. He paused, glancing at Jax, a silent handover in the look. Jax sat beside her then, the bench dipping under his weight, close enough to smell the faint soap on her skin from Lena's quick wipe down. Up close, the bruises on her arms stood out more starkly, thumbprints pressed like accusations against her olive skin. Not from the rope, from grip, from force. You running from something? Jax asked, direct but gentle, his voice dropping to match the hush around them. The canyon's echo seemed to linger in his words, a reminder of how close she'd come to vanishing into it. Elena's hand stilled on the bottle, knuckles whitening, and for a moment, the air thickened with the weight of her silence. Tears welled but didn't fall. Instead, she stared at the horizon where the road snaked away, dust devils swirling like unanswered questions. My ex, she whispered finally, the words tasting of ash. He's persistent. Found me in Flagstaff last night after I thought I'd lost him. I took off at dawn, grabbed my pack, just ran. The trail was supposed to be empty. Safe. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed a fist to her mouth, holding back the sob that threatened to break free. Jax felt it hit him low, a mirror to his own losses. The helplessness of watching someone you couldn't shield, like Lily fading in that hospital bed, machines beeping their indifferent rhythm. The group gathered subtly, drawn by the shift in tone. Rico wiping his hands on a rag, Lena pausing her sorting. Even old man Hale, the club's elder mechanic, emerging from the parts shed with a limp from Nam. No crowding, just presence. A circle of leather and scars that spoke louder than questions. Tank's jaw tightened, a flicker of contained rage in his eyes, the kind that simmered without boiling over. He follow you out here? Jax pressed, his massive hand hovering near hers, not touching, offering anchor if she needed it. She shook her head, but doubt shadowed her face. I don't know. He has ways, friends, money. Said he'd never let me go. The confession hung, moral weight settling like dust after a storm. Help her, and they invited trouble, rival crews, cops sniffing for any excuse to raid the outpost, the world's judgment crashing down on their fragile peace. Walk away, and they became part of the silence that let monsters roam free. Jax exchanged a look with Tank, the Brotherhood's unspoken code humming between them. No one hurts those we protect. It wasn't law. It was deeper, forged in foxholes and funeral rides, where loyalty outlasted badges. Lena stepped forward, her voice soft as she knelt by Elena. Stay tonight. We've got a spare room in the back. Cots that don't bite. Tomorrow we figure the road. Elena's eyes met Jax's, searching for the trap in the kindness, but finding only the steady blue of a man who'd stared down worse than bluffs. She nodded, a small exhale escaping, and in that release, Jax felt his own walls shift. The isolation he'd armored himself with cracking under the warmth of shared burden. As the sun dipped lower, painting the garage in amber hues, the group dispersed to tasks, leaving Elena to breathe in the outpost's rhythm. The clink of tools, the murmur of plans whispered over the grill. Jax lingered, watching her pick up the burger at last, taking a bite with deliberate slowness. The act felt like trust, fragile as the rope that had saved her, and in the quiet, he pondered the turn his ride had taken. The road didn't just test endurance, it demanded choices, pulling you toward the light or the edge. For the first time since Lily, compassion stirred not as pain, but his purpose. A quiet fire rekindled in the shadow of the cliffs. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage and loyalty can travel. The evening settled over the outpost like a heavy blanket, the sky bruising purple as the last light bled from the junipers. Jax stood by the fire pit, poking at the embers with a stick, the crackle of burning mesquite filling the spaces where words might have crowded in. The air carried the tang of cooling metal from the garage, and the faint, acrid bite of Elena's untouched coffee gone cold on the bench. She sat inside now, in the dim glow of the back room, Lena fussing over her with a fresh set of clothes, borrowed sweats from the club's lost-and-found bin, soft and oversized against her frame. Jax could hear the murmur of their voices through the thin walls, low and reassuring, like the hum of an idling engine promising steady ground. He'd stepped away to give her air, but his mind churned, replaying the afternoon's revelations. Her ex, some shadow with money and reach, the kind that twisted protection into possession. Jax knew the type from bar stools and back alley warnings, men who wore suits or grease under their nails, but shared the same hollow eyes, the entitlement that justified bruises. It stirred the old rage in him, contained but coiling, a remnant from patrols where he'd seen villages held hostage by fear. The Hawks had rules, no starting fights, but ending them when the innocent got caught. Yet inviting her storm here meant risking the outpost, the fragile haven they'd built from scrap and sweat. Tank caught his eye from across the yard, wiping his hands on his jeans, the nod between them heavy with the weight of decisions unspoken. Rico ambled over, toolbox in hand, his lean frame casting a long shadow in the firelight. At 35, he was the youngest Hawk, tattoos snaking up his arms like vines claiming ruins, each one a marker for a brother lost to the bottle or the badge. "She solid?" he asked, voice casual but edged with the caution of someone who'd patched up more than engines after bad calls. Jax shrugged, the motion pulling at the fresh scrapes on his palms from the rope. Scared, running hard. X sounds like trouble with a capital T. Rico grunted, setting the box down with a clank that echoed off the tin roof. "World's full of 'em. We gonna ride point on this?" The question hung, moral suspense threading through it. Step in, and they became targets. Stay back, and the Brotherhood's code cracked like dry clay. Inside, Elena peeled off her torn shirt in the dim light of a single bulb, the mirror over the sink reflecting a body mapped by more than the trail. Faded scars along her ribs, a constellation of old hurts she'd hidden under loose layers. Lena worked methodically, applying salve to the bruises, her touch clinical yet kind. The kind born from years of stitching up lives frayed at the edges. "These aren't new," Lena said softly, not accusing, just stating the fact like weather patterns. Elena met her eyes in the glass, the hazel depths flickering with the exhaustion of secrets kept too long. "He didn't always. It escalated after I tried to leave. Said I belonged to him, like property." Her voice trembled, a quiet admission that carried the echo of slammed doors and whispered threats, the slow erosion of self until the canyon seemed like freedom. Lena nodded, no judgment in it, just the solidarity of women who'd walked margins society paved over. She joined the Hawks after her own escape, a city marriage that turned cage, beatings hidden behind manicured lawns. The club had given her purpose, a family that saw strength in silence broken. "You're safe here tonight," she murmured, handing Elena a clean towel. "Jax and the boys. They don't let go once they grab hold. Not of people, anyway." Elena wrapped the towel around herself, the fabric warm from the dryer, a small comfort against the chill seeping through the walls. She thought of the cliff, the wind howling like accusations, and Jax's hand, rough, unyielding, pulling her back. Bikers were monsters in the stories her ex told, to keep her small and scared. But this giant, with his salt and pepper beard and eyes shadowed by ghosts, had risked the drop without a second thought. It unsettled her, this glimpse of compassion wrapped in leather, challenging the walls she'd built to survive. Outside, the conversation deepened as Tank joined them by the fire, the flames dancing shadows across their faces. "She needs a plan," Tank said, his voice a low anchor. "Phone trace, maybe a safe house up north. But if this guy's got pull, He trailed off, the implication clear. Retaliation could come swift, painted as biker aggression to justify a sweep. Jax stared into the fire, the heat prickling his skin, memories surfacing unbidden. Lily's small hand in his during those last hospital visits, her laugh fading to rasps, the impotence of watching life slip despite every fight. He'd failed her then, the system too slow, too indifferent. Elena's plea echoed that helplessness, a moral fork in the road. Ride away clean or stand firm and invite the storm. A distant rumble cut the night, the low growl of engines approaching from the highway, not the Hawks but unfamiliar, tires crunching gravel like teeth on bone. Jack straightened, instincts sharpening, the fire's glow catching the tension in his jaw. Rico vanished into the garage, emerging with a shotgun propped casual-like against his shoulder. No bluster, just readiness. Tank doused the flames with a bucket of sand, plunging the yard into moonlit dark. Elena's voice called from inside, tentative. "What's happening?" Lena hushed her gently, guiding her to a windowless back corner, the air thick with the scent of oiled locks and held breath. The bikes pulled up at the fence, 3 shadows dismounting. Leather cuts without patches, faces obscured by helmets until they clicked open. The leader, wiry with a scar bisecting his lip, scanned the outpost like he owned the dark. "Heard there's a stray hiker causing noise," he called, voice oily smooth, carrying over the cooling engines. Jack stepped forward, his bulk filling the gate. The silence around him judgment incarnate. Society saw them all as the same, thugs on chrome. But here, in the standoff's hush, the line blurred. Elena's ex? Scout? The question burned, rising tension coiling like smoke. Jax's hand flexed, not for violence, but for the protection that defined him, the quiet justice the world denied. Elena peered from the shadows, heart pounding a rhythm against her ribs, the small act of trust in these strangers now teetering on the edge of revelation. Jax's stance, unmoving, a wall of resolve, stirred something deep, a flicker of hope amid the fear. The night held its breath, the moral choice crystallizing. In the face of threat, compassion demanded action, loyalty the only light in the gathering dark. As the strangers advanced a step, Jax's voice cut the quiet, steady as canyon stone. "Roads open, but this ground's ours. Turn back." The words hung, a gauntlet thrown, the Brotherhood's code awakening in the hush before the storm. The strangers halted at Jax's words, their silhouettes sharpening under the moon's pale wash. Engines ticking down to silence that amplified the night's tension like a taut wire. The leader tilted his head, Scar twisting his lip into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Cold, calculating, the kind of gaze Jax had met in border towns and backroom deals gone sour. He was lean, mid-40s maybe, with a faded tattoo peeking from his collar. Not Hawk's ink, but something nomadic. A lone wolf, or worse. His 2 companions flanked him, one stocky with a shaved head that gleamed like polished stone, the other fidgeting with a chain at his belt, the metal links whispering softly in the breeze. The air hung heavy with the scent of exhaust and desert dust, the junipers rustling as if whispering warnings to the outpost's shadows. Jax didn't move. His massive frame rooted at the gate, arms loose at his sides but ready, the weight of his vest a reminder of the code etched into every patch. Behind him the Brotherhood stirred without sound. Rico melting into the garage's gloom, shotgun steady. Tank circling wide through the scrub, a ghost in the dark. Hale's silhouette in the parts shed. Fingers on a radio that could summon the full club if the wind shifted wrong. Elena's breath caught from inside. A faint hitch Lena would hush, but Jax felt it like a vibration through the ground. This wasn't random. The leader's eyes flicked past him, probing the buildings as if scenting prey. Her ex's reach, or a coincidence wrapped in threat, the moral line blurred, demanding a choice. De-escalate and risk exposure, or stand firm and ignite the powder keg society already primed against them. "Easy, big man," the leader drawled, stepping forward a pace, boots grinding gravel. His voice carried the false ease of someone used to buying compliance, hands open but palms scarred from grips that left marks. "Just passing through. Word on the wire's a gal in trouble up Canyon Way. Figured Hawks might know something." The lie slithered out smooth, but Jax caught the undercurrent, the probing, the way the stocky one shifted weight, ready to lunge. Elena's bruises flashed in his mind, those fingerprints a map of control, and rage simmered low, not hot fury, but the quiet burn of a father who'd lost too much to indifference. The world judged them heartless, engines drowning out cries for help, but here they were, guarding a stranger's fragile peace while badges chased headlines elsewhere. Jax's jaw tightened, the salt and pepper in his beard catching moonlight like frost. He thought of Lily then, unbidden, her small frame in that hospital bed, machines humming their futile song, the doctor's averted eyes as options dwindled. He'd begged for intervention, for someone to act before it was too late, but the system had protocols, forms, delays that stole her last breaths. Elena's flight echoed that desperation, a woman slipping through cracks no net caught. "No one's in trouble here," Jax replied, voice steady gravel, low enough to carry intimacy in the standoff. "Road's that way. Take it." His eyes locked on the leader's, a long stare that stripped away pretenses, human emotion raw in the silence, the tremor in his own hands, gloved against the chill, betraying the storm inside. The fidgety one snorted, chain rattling louder, but the leader raised a hand, stalling him. Tension coiled tighter, the night pressing in with the scent of creosote and fear sweat, the distant howl of a coyote underscoring the isolation. Society's misjudgment loomed unspoken. If shots rang out, it'd be the bikers painted as aggressors, another tale of leather-clad chaos to fuel the fear. But the Hawk's justice was quieter, born of margins where law forgot the forgotten. Tank emerged from the shadows now, a deliberate flank, his presence a wall that needed no words. "Brothers," he rumbled, the single word a line drawn in dust, invoking the bond that had pulled Jax from his own abyss after Lily. The leader's smirk faltered, eyes narrowing as he assessed the odds. 3 against a hidden circle, loyalty's hum thicker than blood. Elena watched from the back room's sliver of window, heart hammering, Lena's arm around her shoulders a steady anchor. In that gaze, she saw Jax not as the giant from the cliff but as protector, his broad back a shield against the encroaching dark. It stirred something in her, a crack in her wariness. These men, dismissed as brutes, embodied the compassion her world had denied, standing where others fled. Seconds stretched, moral suspense hanging like the mist over the canyon. The leader exhaled, feigned casual, but defeat edged his tone. "Fair enough. Clear skies, then." He mounted up, the others following, engines coughing to life in a reluctant roar that faded into the highway's black ribbon. Jax didn't relax until the taillights vanished, the outpost exhaling as one. Tank clapped his shoulder, the touch grounding, while Rico lowered the shotgun with a nod. "Close," Hale muttered from the shed, voice wheezy with age but sharp with relief. Inside, Elena stepped into the yard, the borrowed sweats hanging loose, her face pale but eyes clear. "They were," she started, voice trailing. Jax turned, meeting her gaze, the fire pit's dying embers casting warm flickers on his features. "Scouts, maybe? Your shadow's got friends." He paused, the weight of the night settling. "We ride with you now. No one's taking what's not theirs." The words carried the Brotherhood's vow, compassion woven into resolve, a small act blooming into unbreakable loyalty. As the group gathered loosely, sharing quiet words over fresh coffee steaming in the chill, Jax felt the shift deepen, his isolation fracturing under the pull of purpose. Elena's hand brushed his arm in thanks, tentative, and in that touch, redemption whispered, Strength wasn't in solitude, but in the circle that caught you falling. The road ahead twisted with risks, but for the first time, it felt shared. The hum of engines in the distance a promise of justice beyond the law's blind eye. The first light of dawn crept over the outpost like a hesitant intruder, painting the chain-link fence in soft grays and golds, while the junipers stood sentinel against the cooling night air. Jax hadn't slept much, his cot in the bunkhouse creaking under his weight as fragments of the standoff replayed in his mind. The leader's scarred smirk, the rattle of that chain, Elena's wide-eyed vigil from the shadows. The coffee in his mug steamed faintly now, black and bitter, mirroring the resolve settling in his gut. He sat on the porch steps, boots planted in the gravel, listening to the outpost stir. Rico's early clatter in the garage, the low murmur of Tank checking the perimeter with Hale. The scent of dew-kissed sage mingled with the ever-present oil from the bays, a grounding perfume against the uncertainty coiling tighter. Elena emerged from the back room as the sun crested. Her borrowed sweats rolled at the cuffs, hair pulled into a loose ponytail that revealed the faint scar along her jawline, a remnant, perhaps, of earlier storms. She moved with a cautious grace, like a deer testing unfamiliar ground, pausing at the door to scan the yard. Lena had given her a clean backpack the night before, stuffed with essentials from the club's spare kit. Water, energy bars, a burner phone charged and ready. But the gesture hung heavy now, a bridge between flight and facing the chase. "Morning," Jack said, his voice rough from the sleepless hours, rising to meet her halfway. His massive frame cast a shadow that enveloped her, not threatening but enveloping, like the canyon walls that had nearly claimed her. She nodded, hugging her arms against the chill, hazel eyes flicking to the highway where the strangers had vanished. Did they come back? The question trembled at the edges, laced with the fear that had driven her to the trails, her ex's persistence a specter that turned every rumble into pursuit. Jax shook his head, setting his mug down with a soft clink on the step. Not yet, but we don't wait for shadows to strike. He gestured to the bike, his Harley polished by Rico in the pre-dawn quiet, chrome glinting like a promise. The plan had formed in hushed talks after the standoff. Get her north to a safe contact in Utah, a former hawk with ties to women's shelters off the grid. No cops yet. Too many questions. Too much exposure for the club. The Brotherhood's justice was self-contained, a quiet web of favors and routes that dodged the law's prying eyes. Tank lumbered over, keys to the club's old pickup in hand, his bald pate catching the light as he tossed them to Jax. Riggs is expecting you at the crossroads by noon. He'll handle the handoff. Riggs, a grizzled vet who'd ridden with them in the 90s, now ran a ranch that doubled as a way station for those needing to disappear. Tank's eyes lingered on Elena, assessing not just her safety, but the ripple she'd send through their world. You good to ride? He asked her, the rumble in his tone softened by the medic's instinct that never faded. She swallowed, glancing at Jax, the memory of clinging to him on the canyon road flashing in her expression, a mix of vulnerability and budding trust. Yeah, I have to be. The group assembled loosely as they prepped, Lena pressing a small pistol into Elena's pack with a murmured, just in case, her face etched with the empathy of shared escapes. Rico fueling the bikes, his tattoos flexing like warnings under the rising sun. Hale muttering blessings over the engines, his nom-limp a testament to battles long buried. No fanfare, just the hum of loyalty, the kind society dismissed as crude allegiance among outcasts. To the world, the Iron Hawks were relics of a wilder era, their gatherings fodder for cautionary tales, violent nomads disrupting quiet towns, hearts as hard as their leathers. But here, in the dust-choked yard, they revealed the undercurrent. Compassion forged in loss, a code that extended beyond blood to anyone teetering on the edge. As Elena climbed onto the Harley behind Jax, her arms wrapping around his waist with firmer resolve than the day before, the engine's roar shattered the morning hush. The vibration thrummed through them, syncing heartbeats to pistons, the road unfolding like a vein pulsing with risk. They rode out first, the pickup trailing at a distance with Tank at the wheel, Rico and Hale flanking on their own bikes, a convoy born of necessity, not show. The highway stretched north, asphalt shimmering in the heat, flanked by scrub and distant mesas that whispered of isolation. Elena's breath warmed Jax's back, steady now but laced with the scent of her anxiety, faint lavender from Lena's soap, undercut by the metallic tang of fear. "What if he finds me again?" she asked over the wind, voice barely cutting the rush. Jax's gloved hands tightened on the grips, knuckles whitening beneath the leather. "He won't. Not while we're riding." The words carried weight, a vow etched from his own grief, the impotence of Lily's final days, when he'd paced hospital halls begging for more time, only to face indifferent protocols. Elena's plight mirrored that fracture, a woman ensnared by a system that labeled victims as nuisances until they broke. Contained rage simmered in him, not explosive but a slow burn, fueling the need to shield what the world overlooked. They passed a ranger station, the flash of badges inside drawing Elena's flinch, her grip tightening like a plea. Society's guardians, yet blind to the shadows slipping through their patrols. Miles blurred into tension as the sun climbed, the convoy weaving through trucker traffic, eyes scanning mirrors for tails. A black SUV appeared on the horizon, too sleek for these roads, hugging their pace like a predator. Jax signaled Tank with a gloved wave, the pickup surging ahead to block, bikes peeling off to flank. The SUV swerved, accelerating past with a blare of horn. But doubt lingered. Scout or coincidence? Elena's nails dug into Jax's sides through his shirt, a small reaction that spoke volumes, her body trembling against the wind's bite. "It's him," she whispered, voice breaking like gravel under tires. Jax didn't argue, pushing the throttle, the engine's growl a defiant answer. By the crossroads, the tension peaked, dust devils swirling around the rendezvous like omens. Riggs waited in a battered Ford, his weathered face cracking into a nod as they pulled up. But as Elena dismounted, legs unsteady on the parched earth, a distant engine whine pierced the air. Multiple bikes closing fast. Jax's instincts flared, hand dropping to the holster hidden under his vest, the moral crossroads sharpening. Fight here? Expose the Hawks to raids and ruin, or evade and let the pursuit fester? Tank's voice cut through, calm thunder. "Mount up. We draw him off." The Brotherhood moved as one, engines igniting in a symphony of resolve, compassion turning to action in the face of encroaching threat. Elena met Jax's eyes, tears unshed but shining, a silent bond forged in the rush. "Thank you," she breathed, the words heavy with the emotion of lives intertwined. As they roared toward evasion, the road's hum carried a deeper truth stirring. Connections that defied judgments, loyalty as the truest redemption. The chase loomed, risks mounting. But in the shared wind, Jax felt the isolation lift, replaced by the quiet fire of purpose. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Jax reach more people who still believe in humanity. The engine's roar merged into a single thunderous pulse as the convoy surged north, the highway a blurred ribbon of heat-shimmering asphalt, flanked by endless scrub and jagged buttes that clawed at the sky. Jax led the pack, Elena's arms locked around his waist, her body pressed close against the wind's relentless push, every curve and straight, carrying the weight of pursuit. The black SUV's taillights had vanished miles back, but the whine of approaching bikes, 3, maybe 4, grew sharper in the mirrors, a predatory hum that set Jax's teeth on edge. His gloved hands gripped the handlebars like lifelines, the leather creaking under pressure, while the vibration of the Harley traveled up his spine, syncing with the adrenaline spiking through his veins. Contained rage simmered there, not a wildfire, but a banked coal, the kind that had kept him alive in sand-swept ambushes, where hesitation meant graves. Behind them, Tank's pickup growled steady in the trail position, its bed loaded with spare fuel cans that sloshed like unspoken warnings. Rico and Hale peeling off on flanks to weave through the sparse traffic. Semis lumbering like weary giants, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their wake. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air thick with the scent of hot rubber and sun-baked earth, dust plumes rising in their wake like signals to the hunters closing in. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts against Jax's back, warm and ragged, her fingers digging into his vest, as if anchoring to the only solid thing in a world unraveling. "They're gaining," she murmured, voice barely audible over the rush, laced with the tremor of someone who'd learned to read threats in shadows. Jax didn't turn, couldn't afford the distraction, but he felt her fear seep into him, mirroring the helplessness he'd buried after Lily's last rattle of breath in that sterile room, monitors flatlining while he stood frozen, fists clenched against invisible walls. The moral suspense twisted tighter with every mile marker flashing by, the choice crystallizing in the roar. Draw the chase into open territory and risk a roadside brawl that would paint the Hawks as the aggressors, badges swarming to dismantle their quiet haven, or push to the rendezvous, handing Elena off and washing hands of the storm, but abandoning the code that defined them. No one left behind, not even a stranger pulled from the brink. Society's judgment loomed like storm clouds on the horizon, ready to thunder down. Bikers as villains, their loyalty twisted into menace, while the real predators slipped free on technicalities and alibis. Jax's mind raced, fragments of the canyon flashing. Elena's desperate grip on that route, her eyes pleading not just for life but for belief in something kinder. He gunned the throttle, the Harley surging ahead, weaving past a stalled RV with a blare of his horn that echoed off the mesas. Tank's voice crackled over the radio clipped to Jax's belt, static-laced but urgent. 2 minutes to the cutoff. They're matching pace. Looks like nomads. No cuts I recognize. Keep her low. The words grounded him, the Brotherhood's web tightening around the threat. Compassion manifesting as coordinated shadows rather than solitary fury. Rico's bike zipped closer on the left, a quick glance showing his lean form hunched forward, tattoos blurred in the wind, eyes scanning rearward with the precision of a mechanic spotting a fault line. Hale lagged right, his older Norton rumbling steady despite the limp in his posture, a silent testament to endurance forged in jungles long forgotten. They weren't charging into chaos. This was measured protection, the quiet justice of men who'd seen enough fallout to value lives over egos. Elena's hold shifted, one hand pressing flat against Jax's chest, feeling the steady thump beneath the leather, a human anchor amid the mechanical storm. Tears stung her eyes, whipped back by the gale as the landscape blurred into a haze of red rock and sage. She'd run from her ex's grip before, bolting from motel rooms and city edges, always one step ahead until the bruises caught up. But this, clinging to a stranger's bulk, surrounded by the rumble of unlikely guardians, stirred a flicker of something deeper, a compassion she'd written off as myth. These men, dismissed by the world as heartless drifters, rode with a loyalty that shamed the suits and sirens who'd promised safety, but delivered forms and delays. Her ex's face flickered in her mind, his oily charm masking the fists that followed, the threats that turned love into chains. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice breaking through the din, raw with the emotion of walls crumbling. Jax's response came low, swallowed half by the wind, but clear in intent. "Because no one should fall alone." The words carried the weight of his own ghosts, Lily's small hand slipping from his in that final moment, the VA's indifferent shuffle of papers while grief hollowed him out. He'd isolated himself in miles and machines, the Hawks a distant family until this woman dangled from the cliff, forcing him to reach again. The revelation brewed unspoken, a thread pulling tighter. Her locket, glimpsed in the scramble, bore an engraving he'd recognized in the outpost's firelight. A faded hawk, like the club's but personal, a gift from a brother lost years back. Not coincidence, connection, waiting to surface. The cutoff loomed, a dusty side road veering toward Riggs' ranch, hidden by a stand of cottonwoods that whispered in the updraft. Jax signaled, peeling off with Elena tucked low, the convoy splintering to mislead. Tank barreling straight, Rico and Hale looping back to shadow the pursuers. Tires kicked up gravel in a choking cloud, the transition jarring, branches scraping like claws as they plunged into the narrower path. The pursuing bikes hesitated at the fork, engines snarling in frustration, but two broke off, tires screeching in pursuit while the others scattered. Jax pushed harder, the Harley bucking over ruts, Elena's gasp hot against his neck as a branch whipped close. Contained rage fueled him now, balanced by the quiet compassion of her trust. The way her body molded to his, no longer tentative but reliant, a small reaction that humanized the fury. Ahead, Riggs's gate appeared, rusted iron swinging open under his weathered hand, his Ford idling like a faithful dog. But as they skidded to a halt, dust settling in veils, the whine of engines crested the rise, the two chasers emerging from the scrub, leader's scar glinting in the sun as he dismounted, chain in hand. Confrontation crystallized, the air thick with the scent of overheated brakes and impending clash. Jax eased Elena down, his massive form stepping between her and the threat, Tank's pickup roaring up seconds later to block the road. Rico and Hale flanked, shotguns casual but unmistakable, the Brotherhood a wall of leather and resolve. The leader advanced a step, smirk gone, eyes hardening on Elena. "She's mine to collect," he spat, voice laced with the entitlement of her ex's shadow. But Jax's stare met his, unblinking, the long silence judgment's blade, exposing the fragility behind the bluster. Elena's hand found Jax's arm, trembling but steady, her voice cutting the hush. Not anymore. In that moment, as fists clenched and breaths held, the emotional turn peaked, compassion igniting into unyielding protection, the Hawk's code a beacon against the encroaching dark. The standoff teetered, moral lines drawn in dust, redemption hovering in the balance of what came next. The dust hung in the air like a veil of judgment, thick and choking, as the standoff etched itself into the sun-baked earth at Riggs's ranch. Jax stood immovable, his broad shoulders a barrier between Elena and the scarred leader, the man's chain dangling loose in his fist like a serpent poised to strike. The other pursuer idled his bike a few yards back, engine purring low, but his eyes darted nervously between the Hawk's circle and the rusted gate, sweat beading on his shaved scalp despite the relentless heat. Tank's pickup blocked the road, its grille a silent threat, while Rico and Hale flanked Jax, their postures relaxed but coiled, shotguns resting easy across saddles, tools of last resort in a code that prized words over wounds. Riggs emerged from the barn, shotgun in hand, his lined face a mask of weathered calm, the ranch's isolation amplifying every breath, every shift of gravel under boot. Elena's hand trembled on Jax's arm, her nails pressing faint crescents through his sleeve, a small anchor in the rising tide of fear. The leader's gaze locked on her, possessive and unyielding, the scar twisting his lip into a sneer that exposed yellowed teeth. "You think these grease monkeys can hide you?" he snarled, voice slicing the hush like a blade on whetstone. "He sent me, said you'd run, but I'd drag you back where you belong." The words landed heavy, stirring the air with the metallic tang of threat, Elena's body stiffening against Jax's side, her breath catching in a ragged hitch that echoed the canyon wind from days before. Jax felt it ripple through him, a mirror to the impotence of those hospital nights. Lily's labored gasps, the monitor's indifferent beeps, his pleas lost in bureaucratic silence. No more. The Brotherhood hummed behind him, loyalty's quiet pulse, a force society dismissed as brute force but which pulsed with the compassion of men who'd stitched their own wounds in the dark. Tank stepped forward a pace, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed the leader's smirk. "Belong?" he rumbled, voice low thunder rolling across the scrub. "Sounds like a cage. We don't traffic in chains here." The words hung, moral weight pressing down, the standoff teetering on the edge of escalation. Rico's fingers tightened imperceptibly on his shotgun, a subtle gesture born of contained rage, the kind that had seen him pull brothers from wreckage, not plunge them into it. Hale muttered something under his breath, a prayer or curse from Nam shadows, his limp forgotten in the adrenaline's grip. Elena's ex's reach extended here, through this scarred proxy, twisting protection into predation. But the Hawks stood as counterweight, their judgment silent yet absolute. No one claimed what fled in terror. The leader laughed, a brittle bark that cracked the tension, but his eyes betrayed the bluff. Flicking to his partner, weighing odds against the wall of leather and resolve. "You lot? Heroes? World knows better. Cops'll love this. Biker standoff, guns drawn. We'll spin it your way." Society's misjudgment weaponized, the threat of badges turning their compassion into criminality. Headlines branding them villains while the real monster walked free. Jax's jaw clenched, the salt and pepper in his beard stiffening with the wind's stir, memories flooding unbidden. Pulling his buddy from that burning Humvee, hands blistered, only to watch the system bury the truth under red tape. Elena's locket glinted then, catching the sun as she shifted, the engraved hawk flashing. A symbol he'd dismissed as coincidence until now, its lines matching the faded tattoo on his forearm, inked for a sister club long dissolved, lost to a raid that claimed lives and loyalties alike. "Elena," Jax said softly, turning his head just enough to meet her eyes, the hazel depths wide with the storm inside. "That locket, where'd you get it?" Her hand flew to her throat, fingers tracing the silver, tears welling as realization dawned. "My aunt. She gave it to me before she passed. Said it was from her time with riders up north, a protection charm from the Phoenix Hawks. Wait, you?" The late revelation cracked open like thunder, connecting threads across years. Jax's old chapter, splintered after a betrayal that left him adrift. Elena's aunt, the nurse who'd patched him up in a dusty clinic, binding wounds and stories in equal measure. Not strangers, but echoes of family, the locket a bridge from his isolation to this moment, redefining the rescue as fate's quiet hand. Her ex's shadow had chased her into Jax's path, but blood and ink tied them deeper, the moral arc bending toward redemption, not just survival, but reclaiming what loss had stolen. The leader faltered, chain slackening as the shift rippled through the air, Elena's voice gaining steel. "Tell him I'm done. No more running." Jax nodded, the weight lifting fractionally, his massive hand covering hers on his arm, a gesture of solidarity, trembling faintly with the emotion of ghosts laid bare. Tank's presence loomed larger, the Brotherhood closing ranks without a word, their human side piercing the stereotypes. Veterans and mechanics, fathers and mourners, offering the justice law overlooked. The pursuer revved his engine, a whine of retreat, but the leader lunged a step, chain whipping up in a blur of motion. Muffled sounds followed, a scuffle of boots on dirt, grunts swallowed by the wind, Tank's bulk intervening with a firm hold that pinned without breaking. No blood, just restraint, the quiet containment of rage yielding to compassion's hold. As Riggs's men emerged from the barn to secure the intruders, zip ties and a radio call to contacts who handled such shadows discreetly, the tension ebbed, dust settling like forgiveness on the parched ground. Elena leaned into Jax, her sobs muffled against his vest, the first real release since the cliff. The Hawks dispersed slowly, Rico holstering his weapon with a nod, Hale limping back to his bike with a wry smile, Tank clapping Jax's shoulder in silent affirmation. Society might never see this, the heart behind the rumble, but in the ranch's hush, redemption bloomed, isolation shattered, loyalty weaving strangers into kin. Elena vanished into Riggs's safe house, A new start sketched in hushed plans, while jacks mounted up, the engine's hum a familiar balm. The road stretched south, brothers trailing in loose formation, the canyon's echo fading but its lesson lingering. Strength wasn't in the fall, but in the hands that reached. Family forged not by blood, but by the courage to catch what the world let slip. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of the giant biker and the Cliffside Rescue. See you in the next one.